Chapter 2. The Preacher. The preacher was not really a preacher. He had earned the title by his work and willingness to help, even putting himself in danger. He had known that the year 2000 was not going to be the end of the world, and now, many years later, the world was still going on. It was just a changed place. Several years after Hurricanes Fran and Floyd and Katrina and the bombing of the World Trade Center, and after the conflicts in the Middle East were reaching a status quo, and even after the tsunami that had melted down nuclear plants in Japan, he had worked for a rescue squad in a small town on the Virginia coast. During the summer storms, the coast was pounded by monster after monster, the superstorms as they were called. His wife and children had been lost in the first storm, the named one, but there were so many stronger ones after that the names escaped him now. After that season, the storms were only named with numbers, then not even named. They were just another storm. The warnings had come days ahead of time that a Category 5 hurricane was going to hit on the middle east coast of the U.S. As the storm moved closer, the probabilities kept changing until a day before the storm, that the most probable landfall was predicted to be Nags Head in North Carolina. The evacuations had been proceeding for days all along the eastern seaboard, but now they were concentrated mostly on the northern North Carolina coast. Above Nags Head there was not much but sand dunes, the Wright Brothers Memorial, and swamps, and the area was sparsely populated. Then the development began to move north. Virginia Beach was still far away. All of the Outer Banks had been evacuated the day before, and only the diehards, the storm chasers, and the media remained. The evacuations had gone quickly because of the devastating storms in previous years. Andrew, Hugo, Fran, Bonnie, Floyd, Isabel, and right before Fran, the little Bertha, which had destroyed most of the piers on the South North Carolina coast, and had left freezers and washers and sand and furniture and houses in the streets of Topsail Island. And right before Floyd, the little Dennis, which came twice. The list went on and on. Then the 500-year floods came, 2 in 2 weeks, and the first encephalitis outbreaks in New York. But those were just the baby viruses. The preacher remembered all of this. It seemed ages ago. But he had taken his job seriously. He had known that his work would only begin after the storm. He had watched CNN and the Weather Channel, and even though the storm was dreaded, it was hoped it would bring much-needed rain to the inland area of the east and southern east coast. The east coast had been in a drought since the early spring. Most crops had failed. On June 1st, a record high of 112 degrees had been reported for many of the East Coast towns and cities of eastern North Carolina and Virginia and Maryland. Baltimore hit 110. New York and Philadelphia were close behind. The heat indexes had been in the 120s and 130s, and it was estimated that 10,000 people had lost their lives from the heat before the storms even came, which was more than the numbers in France in the summer of 2003. On the island of Monteo, the last known location of the lost colony, a local reporting station reported a temperature of 115 degrees, with a heat index of 135 degrees. On July 4th, in a forgotten year now only named the year of the summer of storms, the first storm had made a direct hit on Virginia Beach at high tide, with winds in excess of 280 miles per hour. The storm surge had been in excess of 50 feet, and it was a full moon. Numerous tornadoes were spawned by the storm, and the devastation was total. Much of even Norfolk was wiped from the map. The preacher thought of all of this, and wiping the sweat from his brow, the heat making him lose the daydream, turned his attention to the hunter. The hunter was not tall and not short, about 5'10" or 6 feet, with jet black hair. It fell just below his ears and ended in a short ponytail in the back. When the preacher looked at his face, he could still not determine the hunter's age. The hunter looked strong, but was not muscle-bound, and he looked ageless. He carried an arsenal of weapons. The preacher had spied on him, cleaning them. The preacher had not liked him at first. The hunter looked dangerous, but when he first looked into the hunter's dusty blue eyes, preacher only saw an honest man with good intentions. When the preacher queried him about his past, the hunter was vague, but he did learn that the hunter believed he was descended from the Lumbee Indians in southeastern North Carolina, and from the lost settlers of Manteo, and from the Asians who migrated across the land bridge to Alaska thousands of years ago, and he also learned that the hunter had served several tours of duty in the Middle East as a chopper pilot. That was pretty much all he knew, but he had a feeling. Within 24 hours after meeting the hunter just below the Virginia border in the middle of a swamp, he had asked him if he would be their guide. They were just headed south, anywhere rural, and away from the cities of death and the dead. And the girl was just a mystery. She had been a mystery since they had tried to rescue her from the burned-out apartment building. Now he was happy that she had attached herself to the hunter. But she badly needed a bath and would not speak. He knew that something had to be done about it. To him she looked young, but it was new times. She should have been a cheerleader in a small-town school, flirting with the boys and buying prom dresses with her mother. Now he saw her as way past first mating age, probably 17 or 18. It was new times, and like the primitive societies of the past, first pairing coincided with first menses. Pushing thoughts of the girl and the hunter from his mind, he looked at the sky. It was going to rain.